had the most amazing conversation with a guy who's an Indian bloke living in San Diego. And I did this story last week about a picture that is bricking people's Android phones. It's a really weird story. This picture, if you set it as a screensaver, it's like a picture of a sunset.
Yeah.
But the Android phones just can't handle it. And so they flash on and off, and you have to factory reset them. It's really weird. And anyway, there was so much interest in this story because it was so strange. And he sent me a message this morning and said, I'm the guy that took the photograph.
Oh, wow.
I was like, no, because I couldn't find it. Yeah, I tried to find the source of this image and I couldn't find it. And it's a very nice photo. It's like a sunset over a lake. I mean, it could be anywhere, you know, I just didn't know.
So it wasn't done it wasn't done maliciously. It just ended up doing that, just a glitch in the Android system.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he said he touched it up in an editing thing called Lightroom. And when you export it from Lightroom, there are two different color formats you can choose. There's an old one and a new one. And he decided to try out the new one. And apparently that is what the problem was. It's just completely like moosed the brains of Android phones. He's gutted. He's like, I've been a photographer for 10 years and, you know, I'm so proud of this photo. And now it's caused everyone so much pain. So when's this going out, Graham?
I'll get it on ZooTube. I'll get it on YouTube. ZooTube, that would be a good thing. Anyway, I'll get the whole thing on YouTube as soon as it's done, so a few hours.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, but then you'll be the guests on the Pod 20 when I cut it up, and you're in a bit of a queue. Alan Alda is on this week. Next week it's Ian Dale. Then I think it's Russ Williams. I think that's about 4 weeks away. But I wouldn't let that worry you about topical stuff, because the topical stuff will still work on the YouTube version. And if there's anything too topical, if I can't couch it, I'll take it out for the radio version. So yeah, because I cut the radio version up into bits and we play that through the chart.
Oh, cool. That sounds really good. Thank you for having us on.
And of course, you'll make the chart.
I should hope so.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Is it like Top of the Pops? Is there like
it's like Top of the Pops, yeah, except I the first week I did it, I had a music bed, but it sounded too cheesy. So now I just count
I love
down
a bit of cheese. Can you be too cheesy? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you count on it, but there's no music on it. So it's, you know, it's about about the podcast, the guests, the podcasters, and yeah. So we're all set. So are we laughing?
Yes, right.
We're all rolling. We're going.
Right. Okay. Are we starting recording now?
We're starting recording now, and I'm going to do the big intro. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. My latest two guests are world-famous broadcasters, really. Susannah Streeter is the anchor for the BBC's flagship programme World Business Report on TV and radio. She was a regular face on BBC One Breakfast, reporting live from across the UK. She also reports for the Consumer Affairs programme Working Lunch that you probably saw, and the BBC Budget programme. Zoe Kleinman is a leading technology journalist and a presenter with a passion for all things tech. She reports on national and international BBC radio, TV and online, including Radio 4's Today programme, BBC World TV, some of the UK's most watched news shows. And they've both together got a fantastic podcast, which is called Backspace and Beyond. Zoe Streeter. No, I've got that wrong. Susannah Streeter and Zoe Kleinman, welcome to the Zoomcast.
Welcome. Maybe that should be our new name. That should
Maybe.
Be Zoe, what do you think? Zoe Streeter. I'm liking that.
Yeah, I'll go for it. I'm very happy.
Now, here you are, as I said, as world-famous broadcasters. Why did you decide to do a podcast together?
We were actually in a lift, weren't we, Zoe? And we were having a chat. We were talking about the tech news of the day. And the lift was going up from the depths of Television Centre up to the second floor where we're based in the business unit. And we just kept chatting and talking. And one of us said, you know, we should do a podcast about this. And as we kind of came out the lift, we were like, well, why don't we do that? Let's just do it. And kind of ran into a radio studio. And the rest is history, as they say.
I think we just sort of gel because we're coming at most stories from very different angles. You know, Susannah does all the kind of business stuff, whereas I do much more of the gadgets and tech side of things. And although there's a lot of common ground there in terms of the stories that we do, you know, work for both of us, but we both have very different takes on them. And I think we sort of listened to quite a few podcasts, haven't we? And sort of felt like either you get two people who have very similar views and just spend the whole time agreeing with each other or kind of saying the same thing in different ways, or, you know, tech podcasts can be, well, quite technical and a bit sort of off-putting, and we wanted to do something that was approachable, I guess, and chatty. And as we discovered from our conversation in the lift, neither of us can shut up. So we thought, you know, the one thing we have got going for us is that we can probably talk about pretty much anything for, you know, 20 minutes or so.
And we thought it was a good time to do it, because the whole idea is that it's the business of technology and how it affects your everyday life, because the digital world is moving so quickly at the moment. So many different developments taking place, particularly as we've been finding with lockdown. The way that we work has changed completely, but it's also looking behind that and looking at the companies and the firms that are responsible for bringing us that technology. What will it mean, not just for their share prices, but actually really what does it mean for us in everyday life? How are we using it? Are these firms responsible? Are they making the right choices for us? There's also, though, quite a lot of humour piled in there about how we're coping, not just in lockdown, but also juggling families with technology, screen time, you know, you name it, we talk about it.
Yeah, it does have a real personal touch. I really do like it. And what's refreshing is you're representing two areas, business and tech, which tend to be dominated by blokes. Was that a conscious? Did you say, "Hey, look, we're two girls. We could give it," or was that just a coincidence?
Well, a coincidence that we're two women.
No, it just happened to be that you were reporters first who happened to be women, rather than was it a deliberate thing saying, hey, you know, listening to other podcasts and saying, look, we need to have two ladies doing this?
I think that's just our everyday experience. I mean, we both work in the business unit. It is dominated by men, particularly as well in the tech desk, although actually, interestingly, there are increasingly more women. I suppose we didn't really think about that. We just thought, well, we know what we're talking about, and so let's just do this podcast, and we get on really well. It just happens that we're women, and then can bring kind of possibly another experience. You know, Zoe, you know, lives at home with two sons. She's got that different experience. I've got three children as well, and yeah, we can add something extra to it, possibly. But I think it is the fact that you know, we know our stuff as well. I think that's the bit. It's not we thought, oh, we're women, we'll do this. Yeah. We thought, we know about these subjects, we'll do it.
Yeah.
I've worked as a reporter in tech for 10 years, and in that time I think things have certainly changed in terms of you know, being a woman working in and around the tech sector. When I first started going to, you know, the big expos, and there's a big tech fair called CES in Las Vegas every January, and the first time I went to that, I'd be interviewing almost always men, you know, who were there promoting their companies and promoting their new gadgets, and they'd be asking me, you know, who's looking after your children? And I'd speak to my male colleagues who were there with me, and they were like, nobody's ever asked us that. And yet I used to get asked that regularly, you know, who's looking after your children while you're here? And it wasn't maliciously meant, I don't think. It was just, but it really struck me that, why, you know, what do you think I've done with them? Do you think I've just left them at home to fend with themselves? Or, you know, it really interested me that, you know, those are the kind of conversations that men would like to have with me. I remember doing an interview with a guy who had this sort of VR gym that he was showing off, and I was doing a piece for television, so we were filming it. And even though it was me doing the interview and me trying it out and me who was on camera, the guy addressed absolutely everything to my male colleague who was filming me. Didn't look me in the eye once, didn't speak. I would ask him a question and he would look to the cameraman as the answer, to the extent at which we had to say, you know, you can't look at him, you have to look at me, because it's going to look very strange on camera. And me and the cameraman sort of joked about it afterwards, but I know it made him feel uncomfortable as well. And I was like, you know what, I'm used to this, really, I'm used to it. I'm not offended by it, it's not your fault, you know, but it is a very strange dynamic to be in a minority. And I've banged on about the impact of this for years. You know, the biggest, most famous example, if you like, is when Apple first came out with its health tracker. You know, it tracked everything: your sleep, your calories, you know, how many times you extend your left arm, I don't know. But what it didn't track was women's periods. And you think, well, that, you know, there are millions of women who not only use Apple products, there are millions of women, full stop, for whom tracking periods is a useful thing. Whether you're trying to have a baby, trying not to have a baby, booking a holiday, you know, there's a million reasons why you need that. And yet it felt to me like a glaring omission. Why did that happen? Well, you know, you imagine that either that fitness, that health tracker was designed by all men or a majority of men, and the one or two women in the room didn't want to stand up and go, can we talk about periods, please? So it is a really important thing, you know.
And definitely, we've certainly seen within the output that we create in the business unit, if you have more women in the business unit, then you are creating more stories, tech stories, business stories that more women might be interested in. The BBC needs to attract new audiences. You need to make sure that the teams reflect those audiences that you're trying to attract. It's interesting though, some of my experiences as a woman, I'm quite small as well, small blonde woman, and occasionally early on in my career you do interviews with, say, big CEOs, and you know that they wouldn't take you seriously until you started asking the questions. And obviously some quite tough questions, and it's quite good sometimes to use that to your advantage and get them on the back foot, because they're not expecting you, or they didn't anyway, when I first started out, to be putting them on the spot quite so much as we were used to. But then that's kind of, you know, that's what bias brings, isn't it? It means that you're not necessarily prepared, and that can work as your advantage, because often it will mean that you might get a better interview. So, you know, there's swings and roundabouts, but certainly you do need diverse teams, and not just women. Obviously, you need all different backgrounds. And I think certainly we are trying to, in our podcast, to try and bring stories to light that will interest lots of different people. We do have a kind of bit of a family focus. There's a lot about how tech can affect you and your family, whether it's how young children are using tech, whether it's what tech's attracting teenagers, how we're coping with tech at home. So that's kind of where we're coming from. But we do really want to supply the stories and the chats that you're all interested in.
I think we've learned a lot about each other as well, haven't we, Susannah? One of the podcasts we did recently, that for some reason, you know, we have these sort of in-depth discussions about tech and business, right? And what came out, by the by, is that I don't like cheese. And, you know, we sort of laughed at Susannah to this day is absolutely horrified by this. And I can't remember whether it was you or me, Susannah, but one of us tweeted it afterwards, you know, in kind of bigging up the new issue of the podcast. And I had about, you know, I had dozens of people getting in touch with me going, what do you mean you don't like cheese? What's wrong with you? And then other people, I'm pleased to say, saying, no, you know what, we don't like cheese either. And I've noticed, Susannah, ever since this chat, you do try and sort of trap me with cheese chat every single time.
It was wine and cheese virtual evenings on the last podcast.
Yeah, she's like, do you fancy a wine and cheese evening?
Yeah.
Oh, was that a trap? Because that seemed it seemed a bit strange for that to pop up in the last podcast. I see, right? So that was a throwback to an earlier thing and a bit of a hook, was it? Yeah.
Didn't it seem strange, Graham? I thought that too.
In the last one, though, you're not scared to take the issues head on. I mean, you opened with talking about the Black Lives Matters protests. Was that a deliberate did you have a discussion beforehand? Do we touch this? Do we stay away from this? Or did you just
We did have a discussion. In fact, we redid that podcast. We don't. Normally, we literally do a podcast and there we go, and it's out and it's published. But we were in the middle of editing it, and the night before, the protests had become absolutely huge, and we had focused on what President Trump was, his attitude towards Twitter and his moves to try
the executive order,
make social media companies responsible for the content on their platform, so they're not just a conduit for news and opinion. But because the riots had begun, we realised that, you know, we really needed to reflect that. So we want to make sure our podcast is of the moment. So if it's landing that week, we want to make sure that we are hitting the issues that you want to hear about that week. Still, a lot of those issues, if you go back to the previous podcast, you know, there are lots of other issues that we talk about which are still relevant to today anyway, that I kind of feel as though it still has a bit of a news angle and a news remit, that we need to be talking about the issues that really matter. So we went back and we revisited the podcast to reflect the huge protests, and also we could then talk about the lack of diversity in tech companies, and not just, you know, female representation, but ethnic minority representation, and how important that was, and kind of take the angle into a different direction. So yeah, that was the only podcast that we thought, you know, we need to really redo that and reflect exactly what's happening.
It's very hard to get the tone right, I think, with that sort of thing. I remember WhatsApping Susannah a few hours after we'd recorded it and just saying, do you know what? I don't think it's right. I think we need to do it again. And it's quite hard because we're both working parents. You know, it's not like we've got loads of time here and we're sort of kids climbing all over us half the time. But we were like, no, we have to try and carve out another half hour here because, you know, it's so important to get that sort of thing right, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do make sure, though, that amidst the big, heavy-hitting topics, that we're also looking at the lighter side of life and, you know, recounting some of the crazy incidents that happen when you're stuck in a broom cupboard broadcasting, as I am at the moment, like going to heat up a Thai red curry at midnight and scalding your hand and having to keep it in a big jug of water all the way through the broadcast that you're broadcasting right across the world, which was one of my live BBC radio shows. So there's a little bit of kind of behind the scenes as well in there as well about what it's like as a broadcaster, as a reporter, dashing into TV and radio studios usually, or dashing into our makeshift studios now.
A lot of people, to talk about tech and business, probably about 5 years ago, they were banging on a lot about the next big thing for the tech business was going to be wearable tech. And I was a naysayer at that stage because Google Glass had failed. And the Apple Watch counter is usually the emptiest counter in the Apple Store. But now I find myself wearing this ring, which is a payment ring. It's called K-Ring, and I fist bump things. It's not so great now because you're not supposed to touch anything. But anyway, are we gonna move forward with wearable tech? Is it the future that we were promised?
Well, do you know what? It's got moved past wearable tech. There are people who have chips inserted under their skin to make payments. Yeah, in fact,
really?
Yeah, it does. That has actually happened. People have done it to progress to the next stage. I personally carry my phone everywhere. I put it in my pocket, I put it in my bag, I put it in my rucksack when I'm running. You know, I've got my camel pack with my little water carrier and I put my phone in there. I use my phone and integrate it into whatever tech I'm wearing. I just think there's too many other things. At least you've only got one thing to remember and not lose, you know?
Do either of you have a smartwatch?
Bracelet and the ring and the necklace and the bag and too many things. Just take the phone, my little computer to take everywhere.
I'm quite fortunate in my job. I get to try out quite a lot of this stuff. I'm not allowed to keep it, I hasten to add, but I get to try it out. And I have worn a number of devices. I think, I mean, in a way this comes back to what we were talking about earlier with women. I think a lot of them are just designed for men. You know, many smartwatches are enormous. Like I wouldn't say I've got the wrists of a child, but I put a smartwatch on and I can barely move the rest of my arm. So I think for lots of them the design has been an issue, and there's also that kind of thing where they sort of fall between two stools. Now that can work. You know, we all said that about the iPad when it came out, didn't we? Like, what do you need that for? Is it a phone or a computer? What is it? But it's found its niche. I think the thing with the watches is they are so small, aren't they? I mean, do you remember when the Apple Watches first came out, you sort of watch people trying to read or write a message? With me, I'm in my 40s, my God, I can barely see up close as it is, you know. I sort of struggle with that. But even having said that, the device was too big to be comfortably worn. And I think what we've seen is a lot of people have taken up wearables, but it's not like everybody's got one, you know, like you said.
We were told everybody was going to get it, but yeah. That's
what we thought. And usually Apple is quite good at taking an idea and really bringing it to the mainstream. You know, look at what happened with the iPhone. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, but that came out in 2007, and now everybody has an iPhone shaped device, whether it's Apple or Android or whatever. You know, you can look to Apple to bring that mass appeal, but even it hasn't quite done that, I don't think, with the Apple Watch.
Yeah, the thing I couldn't work out with the Apple Watch is I'm right-handed, so this finger is the one I use to work my phone. So I hold my phone in my left hand, and if I want to why would I twist my wrist this way to look at the watch when the phone is right here? I never worked out why it was a big deal.
It's fiddly,
Also,
isn't it? I think. Sorry, go on, Susannah.
I was going to say, talking about whether things can fit in your hand. You know, I haven't upgraded my phone. I don't want a big phone because I like the little, iPhone SE because it kind of fits quite nicely. It's the
My
right
wife's
size.
the same. She has the small one. Yeah, the SE. She loved the old SE, not the new one. She loves it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got the old SE. I've got the old SE. It's a little bit cracked. I mean, we're talking about as well, one of our podcasts coming up, all about all the devices that you still have at home, these electronic devices that are still working, they're still doing their job. Why do we need to upgrade all the time when they're perfectly fine, as long as, of course, you don't have to upgrade for certain operating systems? But it's amazing to think how many gadgets that we have collecting dust in our homes, which actually still would work pretty well. We just have this kind of, we need to get the latest new thing. Do we, are we going to change this? Do you think in lockdown, the very fact that people haven't been buying things so much has made people revisit what they have and value the older devices a little bit more? We're going to be exploring that.
Susannah, I'm sorry, I'm slightly focused on the fact that you described your phone as a little bit cracked. That is the biggest understatement I have ever heard. Your phone is a mess.
It is a mess, but you know what? It still works. I'm still recording us on my phone. It's cracked. It's a mess, but it's still working. Shows that they are pretty robust, and you don't always need to upgrade to the next new model, although I do need a new screen. You are right. I will get round to it with the other huge list of things that I have to do today.
Tell me about how you record Backspace and Beyond then. Because of lockdown, you can't be together, I'm guessing, unless you're together at work when you... I mean, are you still going into...
we used to be able to just nip into the little radio studio after we'd finished our day of work and record, put it straight into the system and then edit. Now we both record on our recording devices. I have mine just here. I can show you. Let me just get it. So I record onto this.
Zoom.
And Zoe's got a similar piece of kit. Yeah. And then we actually call each other up on WhatsApp video so that we can see each other. We have headphones plugged in from our WhatsApp video so we can talk to each other on video and then record on our devices. So it's like we're still in the same room. And actually lockdown has proved that we can take this podcast anywhere because we can do that anywhere in the world. And the sound quality is pretty good. So, it takes the podcast completely out of the studio, puts us on the road, and it means that we can just keep on going.
We were a bit nervous about it, or certainly I was when lockdown started, because it's quite a long form chatty thing, and I think I felt like it might be quite hard to do that. And also, of course, we had a lot less to talk about because suddenly neither of us was really going anywhere, but it has sort of worked really well. And I think we went a couple of weeks, didn't we, when we both just, neither of us mentioned it and sort of thought, oh, maybe we'll just have a break from this, because this is all such a weird situation. And then somebody tweeted us, didn't they, saying, where's your podcast? And it sort of kicked us back into action again. Yeah, thank you, Ian.
One of our fans. And he really did. He just said, come on, we really want to hear from you. What's life like? And so we've really, gone at it with a vengeance again and realised there is so much to talk about. We're both working remotely. I'm broadcasting remotely, doing a show today and tomorrow, doing late night shows, still covering lots of different business and tech topics on my radio show, and then bringing that experience and also life experience, what it's like under lockdown. Like everybody has a different experience, don't they? But I think it's such a tech experience that it's really good to explore through the podcast.
Yeah, we're kind of lucky in a way, I hate to say that COVID-19 happened when it did. Because if it happened 10 years ago, I think it would have been a very different experience because of the lack of tech.
Particularly for children and teenagers. My boys, who are at 10 and 13, are so used already to be socializing online. They have got their groups of friends that they link up with on the Xbox, on Fortnite, play team games, and they feel as though they've still got a social life. And during those games, that's when they chat. They're very different to girls of the same age who will chat for hours on the phone through Zoom calls or WhatsApp video calls. They don't want to chat like that. They want to chat while doing something. And so gaming already existed. And so I don't worry so much about how much time they're spending now, because I can see it's really good for them mentally. I used to think before it's bad for them mentally, but now I can see that actually staying in contact in that way has just been a godsend, really.
I think what's amazing though is how quickly you burn through devices. You know, I've got 2 kids, and the other day one of them had a birthday party Zoom quiz with his mate. So he needed, I think he took my laptop in the end, and he needed an app for the quiz. So he was using my phone as well. And then the other one had, oh, I'm really struggling with the whole homeschooling business. That's another thing. So I've sort of outsourced it. So someone I know is giving him an hour's maths lesson a week. So he needed another device with Skype on it for that. And I just sort of found myself sitting there going, okay, I'll just read a book then, you know, because every device that I have is sort of commandeered by my children. It's really interesting. And I know that, you know, we're very fortunate that we've got enough to go around. And I know that some families have really struggled with that because,
yeah,
you know,
we've explored that as well,
different.
haven't we? We've explored that in our podcast, the great digital divide that there exists right across the country, because so many lessons have gone online. Paper documents haven't been freely available for pupils to pick up, their families to pick up from the schools, which means that they're highly reliant on whether their parents have got laptops, have got digital devices that they can use. And when you're also still trying to work as well at the same time, it means there's just not enough to go round. There haven't been enough campaigns to ensure that those pupils around the country who don't have access to a laptop have got one. So there is real concern that education is going to suffer. And I think heading towards September, that's something that we've really got to get to grips with if schools still don't go back fully as is what's predicted at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I had a phone-in caller on it was actually BBC London once, and they were trying to tell me the importance of getting kids into books, and it turned into an argument. So I was saying, what's the point? These kids are going to be looking at things on their screens. Why do we want them to get into books? We should be encouraging them to get into gadgets. I don't know where you stand on that. Probably a difficult position as a parent.
I think you need a break.
Go on, you go.
Yeah, I think they need a break. I think, you know, in the evening, winding down, you need an hour and a half. You need an hour and a half, 2 hours to wind down. So we are really, in my house, really like no gadgets in their rooms. Well,
there's a gadget curfew.
We've kind of actually relented on that with the 13-year-old who's got the Xbox now in his room for the first time. But it goes off, and woe betide if he puts it on past, 9 o'clock. There's a huge argument that ensues. He's tried it once, and then he has to read books, and that's what that's what I think is really, really important. And my younger ones definitely, they need to read proper books. I'm not even so keen on a Kindle late at night because I still think it's got that reflective screen, but the rest of the day, absolutely. Let's get to grips with it. It's the future. We've got to make sure that they are not just able to use an iPad, but to code, to make sure that they can video edit, because these are all the skills. And actually it's interesting because I hosted a conference on autonomous shipping last year, and they were talking about the new skills that all of these land seafarers would need in the future to be able to command these ships from land rather than being on them. And they were talking about the skills they needed, and I said, do you know what, that's the skills that my 13-year-old is building up playing Fortnite, because the skills that they actually, and they agreed with me. The heads of these big shipping organizations said, yeah, that's what we want those types of skills, the teamwork, the rapidity of thought, and be able to respond very, very quickly on screen to what's happening. So these skills that they're building up in games will be useful.
I think we need to rethink our perspective on tech. I think we tend to be quite snobby about it, don't we? And we sort of think, well, screen time is somehow a waste of time. If you're on your screen and you're messing about, you're not doing what you should be doing, and there's something more worthy and useful that you should be doing with your time. But what we forget is how much we do. You know, let's just take the phone. Let's just take one device, your phone. You're communicating, you're socializing. You may well be doing your online banking. You might be looking at the weather forecast. You know, you might be writing on it. You might be broadcasting. I mean, there are so many different things that you can do on that one device now. And while, yes, mindlessly scrolling through social media might not feel like a good use of your time if you don't think it is, you know, you could argue that social media platforms now are on a par with the big news organizations. They are how people get their news, and who are we to say that there's something inferior about that? You know, I think this sort of screen time debate really needs revisiting, and we need to remember that exactly what it is that we are doing when we're using our devices, because I'm not convinced that it is all a waste of time.
No.
So what they should really be doing is listening to Backspace and Beyond as the podcast, really. And then they could be getting on with doing something else, you know, creating art or changing the world or saving the world while they're listening to your podcast.
Exactly right.
Good idea, Graham.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for your time. The podcast is available I found it on the Apple thing on my phone. Spotify, it's very easy to find. It's everywhere.
Audio Boom, everywhere.
Okay. And do you know what's in next week's? Do you know what's in next week's yet?
Yeah, well, actually, we're going to chat about. I've done this. I tweeted this thing yesterday that's gone completely mad, and it's about people still using really old gadgets.
I saw that. Yeah.
And it's just taken on a life of its own. I've had the most. I wish I could sort of, I don't know, print it out and display it. The most incredible photos and stories of people using, you know, 50-year-old Kenwood food mixers. My word, I think they were designed to survive the apocalypse. You would not believe how old they are and how many people are still using them. You know, original Game Boys and really old sort of games consoles, sewing machine. I mean, it's just beautiful. The amount of things that people are saying that they're just not getting rid of. Hi-fi equipment, you know, ancient speakers and turntables and old FM radios that just do not give up the ghost. And you know, you sort of
the only thing is though, so I bet there are so many arguments in those houses. There'd be one partner saying, "Can you just get rid of that rubbish? You've just mountains of it. Come on, let's get some new stuff."
It's appealing to the inner hoarder in me, certainly, because I sort of have a habit of keeping everything. But you know, it's absolutely amazing to see at a time when we are really pushed quite hard, aren't we, as a consumer society, to buy and to get the next version and to do the software update and all the rest of it. Whereas actually this kit that was made, you know, my nan had a chest freezer that I know for a fact is older than me and is still going in somebody's house, I'm sure.
We have whisk, hand whisk.
Yeah,
our hand whisk is still going strong. My husband's mother's hand whisk.
You're going to need more than one episode for that, I think. But it's a great podcast. It's Backspace and Beyond. Susannah Streeter and Zoe Kleinman, thanks for being on the Zoomcast, and thanks for being on Podcast Radio.
Thank you.
Thank you.